The dimensional rifts appeared across council space like wounds in reality itself. 17 rifts opened simultaneously in different sectors, far too coordinated to be natural occurrences. Within hours, Vecnarl began pouring through in numbers that dwarfed the Threshold 9 incursion. The Galactic Council mobilized every available fleet, but the enemy was overwhelming their defenses. 6 months had passed since humanity's evaluation. In that time, Earth had been granted provisional membership with limited rights. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was progress. Now, as the council chambers filled with panicked reports, Taman watched the greatest powers in the galaxy struggle to mount an effective defense. The Vrelnath Third Fleet has been destroyed, a delegate reported, his voice shaking. The Vecnarl destroyed 12 capital ships in under an hour. The Hrathak are retreating from Sector 9, another added. They cannot hold against the numbers. Quellan Hive ships are requesting reinforcements in 4 separate locations. They are being overrun. Senior Arbiter Queln stood at the center of the chaos, his armored form rigid with stress. The Hrathak was trying to coordinate the defense of dozens of systems at once, and it was clearly failing. The Council's strategy had always relied on their species' natural advantages: Hrathak strength, Vrelnath firepower, Quellan coordination. But the Vecnarl had evolved to counter those specific advantages. They were the ultimate predators designed by their dimension to hunt the galaxy's apex species. Arbiter, Taman said quietly, may I make a suggestion? Every eye in the chamber turned to him. The human ambassador had been sitting quietly in the observer section, watching the disaster unfold. Now he stood, and there was something in his posture that commanded attention. Speak, Queln said. He sounded exhausted. You're fighting the wrong war, Taman said. You're trying to match the Vecnarl strength for strength, and you're losing because they evolved specifically to beat that strategy. You need to change how you fight. And I suppose humans know better, a Vrelnath delegate said angrily. Your species has been part of this council for 6 months. What do you know of galactic warfare? Everything, Taman replied calmly. We have spent those 6 months studying every conflict in council history. We have analyzed your tactics, your strategies, your victories and defeats. We have learned from all of you, and we have applied our own experience fighting wars against opponents who think like us. If you want to survive this, you need to let humanity help. The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates supported the idea, remembering Threshold 9. Others were insulted that such a young species presumed to teach the galaxy's elder races. But underneath the argument was desperation. The Vecnarl were winning and everyone knew it. If we accept your help, Queln said, his voice cutting through the noise. What would you do? First, we stop thinking of this as a conventional war, Taman said. He activated a holographic display showing the rift locations. The Vecnarl aren't just invading. They're establishing beachheads. They want permanent access to our dimension, so we don't try to fight them everywhere. We pick our battles. We use mobile warfare instead of static defenses. We make them chase us into traps. He zoomed in on one of the rift locations. Second, we stop fighting to their strengths. The Vecnarl are natural predators evolved to hunt, so we stop acting like prey. We become the hunters. We use asymmetric tactics, guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run attacks, psychological operations. We make them afraid. The Vecnaril do not feel fear, a Hrathak military commander objected. Everything feels fear when it's losing, Taman countered. Third and most important, we teach your forces to think like humans, to adapt, to improvise, to stop relying on what nature gave you and start using what your minds can create. Queln was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would change the war. The Council accepts Earth's offer of assistance. Ambassador Taman, you will have full access to our military command structure. Teach us how to fight like humans. Within a week, Admiral Byung-ho arrived from Earth with a staff of human military advisors. The Admiral was an older man, weathered by years of service, and he brought with him experience from every type of warfare humanity had ever developed. He also brought something else, a complete strategic analysis of the Vecnarl threat that Earth's military had prepared. We have been studying the Vecnarl since Threshold 9. Byung-ho explained to the assembled Council military commanders. We have analyzed their tactics, their biology, their hunting patterns. We know how they think, and we know how to beat them. He outlined a comprehensive strategy that shocked the Council. Instead of defending population centers directly, humans proposed abandoning some worlds temporarily and using them as bait. Instead of meeting Vecnaril swarms head-on, they would fragment the enemy forces and destroy them piecemeal. Instead of relying on heavy firepower, they would use the environment as a weapon. "You are asking us to sacrifice worlds?" A Vrelnath commander was horrified. "I'm asking you to evacuate civilians and use those worlds as killing grounds," Byung-ho corrected. "The Vecnarl want to establish territory. Let them think they have it. Then we collapse those territories on top of them." The strategy was implemented over the protests of traditionalist commanders. Human advisors were integrated into every level of the military command structure. They didn't take over operations, but instead taught alien commanders to think differently. They taught Hrothek officers to fight with speed and mobility instead of brute force. They taught Quellan hive minds to embrace chaos and individual initiative. They taught Vrelnath capital ship captains to use their massive vessels like guerrilla fighters instead of line ships. The change didn't happen overnight. The first few engagements using human tactics resulted in mixed success. Some commanders couldn't adapt to the new strategies. Others embraced them and achieved stunning victories. Slowly the tide of the war began to shift. A turning point came at the Battle of Kriva Station. A major Vecnarl force had established a beachhead around a dimensional rift in a densely populated system. The Council fleet, following traditional tactics, would have met them with overwhelming force in a direct assault. Instead, a joint human Hrothak task force under Commander Drak implemented a different plan. They seeded the system with false targets and energy signatures, drawing the Vecnarl into scattered pursuit. They used the system's asteroid field as a weapon, rigging rocks to explode when the enemy passed. They employed psychological warfare, broadcasting signals that confused the Vecnarl's electromagnetic senses. And when the enemy was fragmented and confused, they struck with coordinated precision, destroying the rift before the Vecnarl could regroup. The victory at Kriva was not just military, it was psychological. It proved that the Vecnarl could be beaten using human methods. More importantly, it proved that non-human species could learn to fight like humans. The rigid, specialized thinking that had made the Council's species great was giving way to flexible, adaptive strategies. As the war progressed, something remarkable happened. The various species of the Council began sharing tactics and learning from each other in ways they never had before. Hrothak strength combined with human mobility, Quellan coordination enhanced by human psychological warfare, Vrelnath firepower directed by human strategic thinking. The Council was evolving, becoming something greater than the sum of its parts. 1 year after the crisis began, the last major Vecnarl rift was sealed. The extra-dimensional invaders had been pushed back and contained. The victory came at a terrible cost in lives and resources, but the galaxy had survived. The Council convened to honor the fallen and to acknowledge the debt they owed to humanity. Taemin stood before the Council once more. This time, Senior Arbiter Queln came down from his position and approached the human ambassador directly. The massive Hrothak bowed his head in a gesture of profound respect. "Humanity has earned full membership in this council," Queln said. "All restrictions on your species are lifted. You have proven yourselves worthy not through biological superiority, but through something perhaps more valuable. You taught us to be better than we were." After the public ceremony ended, Queln asked Taemin to meet with him privately. In a quiet chamber away from the crowds, the Hrothak asked the question that had been bothering him since Threshold 9. "Your adaptability," Queln said slowly. "Your capacity to learn and change. Your refusal to be limited by your biology. Is this evolution? Or were humans designed by some ancient precursor race? Were you created to be the ultimate survivors?" Taemin smiled. It was a question humans had asked themselves throughout their history. "Does it matter?" he replied. "Whether we evolved naturally or were designed by something greater, the result is the same. We are what we are, survivors, adapters, learners, but why?" Quellan pressed. "Why would nature or any designer create a species that is weak in so many ways?" "Because strength isn't everything," Taemin said. "The strongest species can be brought down by something stronger. The fastest can be caught by something faster. The toughest can be broken by sufficient force. But adaptability? There's no upper limit to adaptability. We can always learn more, change more, become more." News of what happened at Threshold 9 spread through the Galactic Council, faster than light-speed communications could carry it. 4 humans in a research vessel had held off a Vecnarl incursion for 12 hours. They had rescued 3 Hrothak soldiers. They had collapsed a dimensional rift using nothing but creativity and a willingness to sacrifice their own ship. The story seemed impossible, yet Zith the Peluvian had recorded everything, and Commander Drac himself testified to the truth of it. The council chamber was filled to capacity when Tae-min stood before them again. This time the atmosphere was completely different. Where before there had been dismissive amusement, now there was intense interest in something that might have been worry. Ambassador Tae-min, Senior Arbiter Quellen said, and his voice held a note of respect that had been absent before. The Council has reviewed the records of the Threshold 9 incident. We have questions about your species. Many questions. I will answer what I can, Tae-min replied calmly. Behind him stood Dong-hyun, still recovering from his wounds. The captain had lost his left arm below the elbow during the final desperate battle to seal the rift. He wore a temporary prosthetic, but he stood straight and tall, meeting the eyes of any delegate who looked at him. 4 of your people held off hundreds of Vecnaril, Queln continued. The Vecnaril are apex predators. They evolved to hunt species like the Hrathak. They should have killed your crew in minutes. Yet instead your humans killed dozens of them and held their position for half a day. We need to understand how this is possible. Tae-min gestured to Haewon, who stepped forward. The xenobiologist activated a holographic display that showed a human body rotating slowly in the air. If the Council will permit, I would like to explain what humanity truly is. Proceed, Quellen said. 3 months ago, this Council evaluated humanity and found us biologically insufficient, Haewon began. That evaluation was correct in its observations, but incorrect in its conclusions. Yes, humans lack natural armor. Yes, we are not particularly strong or fast. Yes, we have no natural weapons. But the Council missed what makes humanity unique. She expanded the holographic display to show a human running across a savanna. Humans are endurance predators. On Earth, our ancestors hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We can run for hours without stopping. Our cooling system, based on sweating through our skin, is the most efficient in Earth's animal kingdom. We can operate in temperatures that would kill most species here today. A Quellen delegate interrupted. Many species can endure harsh conditions. This does not explain Threshold 9. I'm getting to that, Haewon said. She changed the display to show a human hand. Look at this. 5 fingers with opposable thumbs. We can manipulate tools with incredible precision. We can tie knots, we can assemble complex devices, we can turn almost anything into a tool or weapon. At Threshold 9, the humans used pipes, chemicals, and machinery. They improvised weapons from whatever they found. Tool use is universal among intelligent species, another delegate pointed out. Yes, but consider the speed of that tool use, Haewon countered. Captain Dong-hyun and his crew had never seen a Vecnaril before that day. They had no specific weapons designed to fight them. They had 12 hours to prepare. In that time they analyzed the enemy, identified weaknesses, and created new tactics. That level of adaptation is not universal. She changed the display again, this time showing a complex chart of human brain activity. Human pattern recognition is extraordinary. We see patterns in everything. We learn from observation. We can take a concept from one field and apply it to another. Captain Dong-hyun studied ancient Earth military history and applied those tactics to fighting extra-dimensional creatures. That kind of creative thinking is humanity's true strength. You speak of intelligence, Queln said, but intelligence alone does not win battles. The Vecnaril are also intelligent. They coordinate, they adapt, they learn. What made the difference? Tae-min stepped forward again. May I answer that, Arbiter? Queln gestured permission. The difference is that humans are generalists, Tae-min said. Every species in this council evolved to be excellent at one thing. The Hrathak evolved to be strong and armored. The Peluvians evolved to survive in extreme energy environments. The Quellen evolved to work as a perfect collective. You are all specialists, perfectly adapted to your specific niches. Humans evolved to be adequate at everything and excellent at adapting. He walked slowly around the chamber, making eye contact with different delegates. We are not the strongest, so we learn to use leverage. We are not the fastest, so we learn to set traps. We are not the best armed, so we learn to make weapons. We are not the toughest, so we learned medicine and armor. Every weakness we have, we learn to compensate for. That is what we are. That is what we have always been. But there is something else, Military Advisor Jiwoo said, stepping forward to join Tae-min. Something the Council needs to understand about human nature. We evolved fighting ourselves. A ripple of confusion went through the chamber. Ji-woo continued. Every species here earned their place by surviving external threats. You fought aliens or disasters or cosmic horrors. Humans had all of those things too, but our greatest threat was always other humans. For thousands of years, we fought wars against enemies who thought exactly like us. We had to constantly innovate because our opponents would copy any successful tactic. He activated his own display, showing the history of human warfare. We developed strategy and tactics to a level that most species never needed. We studied game theory, psychological warfare, logistics, combined arms operations. We created military academies to teach these skills. We wrote thousands of books about warfare, not because we love fighting, but because we were so good at killing each other that we had to become experts at it to survive. Are you saying your species is naturally violent? A delegate from the Vrelnath asked, sounding alarmed. No, Ji-woo said firmly. I'm saying we are naturally competitive. We compete with each other. We compete with our environment. We compete with every challenge we face. And that competition forced us to become better at everything. Our technology advanced because we competed to build better tools. Our science advanced because we competed to understand nature. Our tactics evolved because we competed to outwit each other. And now you face outward, Queln said quietly. Now that competition and adaptation faces the galaxy. Yes, Taemin said, but not as conquerors, as survivors, as learners. The Council rejected us 3 months ago, and that rejection taught us something valuable. It taught us that we need to understand the galaxy before we can be part of it. So we have been studying, learning, adapting, just like we always have. He pulled up data on his display. In 3 months, we have analyzed every historical record the Council provided. We have studied your wars, your tactics, your technologies. We have learned from your successes and your failures. At Threshold 9, Captain Dong-hyun used Trothic defensive doctrines combined with Quellan coordination tactics and Peluvian energy manipulation principles. He took the best of what the galaxy had to teach and adapted it to human capabilities. That is disturbing, a delegate said. Why? Taemin asked. Because we learn quickly? Because we adapt? Because we refuse to be limited by what nature gave us? He looked around the chamber. The Council called us biologically insufficient. You were right. We are insufficient. We have always been insufficient. But we survive anyway. We thrive anyway. We do this by being smarter, more adaptable, and more stubborn than our limitations would suggest possible. What would happen, Quellan asked slowly, if humanity faced a true extinction threat? If you were pushed to the edge of survival? Taemin met the Hrothak's 3 eyes without flinching. We would become whatever we needed to become. We would adapt until we found a way to survive. That is what we do. That is what we have always done. We are not the strongest or the fastest or the toughest, but we are the most stubborn. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We find a way or we make a way. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate was processing what they had heard. Humanity was not impressive in the way they had expected. Humans were not powerful warriors or armored juggernauts. They were something potentially more dangerous. Universal adapters who could learn any skill, adopt any tactic, and survive any challenge through sheer creativity and determination. The Council must discuss this, Queln said finally. Ambassador Taemin, you and your colleagues are dismissed. We will call you when we have reached a decision on humanity's status. As the humans left the chamber, Dong-hyun leaned close to Taemin and whispered, Do you think they understand now? They understand that we're different, Taemin replied quietly. Whether they understand what that means? We'll find out soon enough. Behind them, the Galactic Council began the most intense debate in its long history. The question was not whether humans were strong enough to join them. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for humanity. The outpost corridors were dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of red. Dong-hyun led the way, a plasma cutter in one hand and a scanner in the other. Behind him came So-hyun with medical supplies, and behind her, Jaemin carried what tools and equipment they could spare from the ship. Ye-jin had stayed aboard the Sejong to study the rift, protected by the ship's shields. They found the survivors in what had been the command center. 3 Hrothak soldiers, each one wounded, huddled behind a makeshift barricade. When Dong-hyun's light found them, the massive beings raised their weapons, then lowered them in confusion. You're human, one of them said. His translator struggled with the words, damaged by whatever injury had torn a gash across his armored chest. What are humans doing here? Answering your distress call, Dong-hyun replied. I'm Captain Dong-hyun. This is our medic, So-hyun, and our engineer, Jae-min. We have a ship in orbit. Can you move? The Hrathik who had spoken tried to stand and failed. I am Commander Drak. These are my soldiers, Krell and Moth. We cannot move far. The Vecnarl poison is in our blood. It slows us, weakens us. We were waiting to die fighting. So-hyun pushed past Dong-hyun and knelt beside Drak. The Hrathik was easily 3 times her size, but she examined his wounds with professional efficiency. The poison is organic, she said after a moment. I can synthesize an antidote, but I need time and equipment. We'll have to get you back to our ship. There is no time, Drak said. The Vecnarl are gathering for another assault. They will come through these corridors within the hour. You should leave while you can. Not happening, Dong-hyun said. He activated his communicator. Ye-jin, status report. From the Sejong, Ye-jin's voice came through with barely contained excitement. Captain, I think I found something. The rift is being held open by energy patterns that match our exotic radiation readings. If we can disrupt those patterns, we might be able to collapse it. But we need a massive power source positioned directly at the rift's opening. How massive? Dong-hyun asked. About equal to our ship's reactor running at full overload for approximately 30 seconds before catastrophic failure. Dong-hyun and Jae-min exchanged looks. So we blow up our ship inside the rift, Jae-min said. That's your plan? It's the only plan I have. But we need to get the ship into position first, and those creatures are between us and the rift. Plus, we need to evacuate these soldiers first. Captain, we're talking about at least 12 hours of preparation. Then we buy 12 hours, Dong-hyun said. He looked at Drak. Commander, where are the outpost defensive systems? Destroyed or inoperable. The Vecnarl's first wave took out our primary weapons. We've been fighting with small arms. Drak's eyes, all 3 of them, focused on Dong-hyun. Human, you do not understand. The Vecnarl are unstoppable. They are pure predators. They sense electromagnetic fields. They have armor that resists most energy weapons, and they are intelligent enough to coordinate attacks. A single Vecnarl warrior can kill a trained Hrathik soldier. There are hundreds of them below us. Good thing we're not planning to fight them fair, Dong-hyun said. He pulled up a schematic of the outpost on his scanner. Jae-min, what can we work with? The engineer studied the layout. Atmosphere processors in sections 3 and 7. Gravity generators in the lower levels. What's left of the power grid? Some chemical storage. Captain, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, we turn this entire outpost into a weapon. Dong-hyun finished. We don't try to kill them with superior firepower. We use the environment. We trap them, redirect them, slow them down. Every advantage we can create, we use. So-hyun looked up from treating Drak's wounds. I need 6 hours to synthesize enough antidote for 3 Hrathik. Can you give me 6 hours? We'll give you 12, Dong-hyun said with more confidence than he felt. He turned back to Drak. Commander, tell me everything you know about how the Vecnarl hunt. For the next 30 minutes, Drak described the creatures in detail. They were roughly humanoid but covered in black chitinous armor. They had 4 limbs that could function as either arms or legs. Their heads were dominated by sensor organs that detected electrical fields. They communicated through ultrasonic frequencies and coordinated their attacks with disturbing efficiency. They were fast, strong, and nearly fearless. But as Drak talked, Dong-hyun began to see patterns. Weaknesses hidden within strengths. The Vecnarl's armor was strong but had joints that flexed. Their electromagnetic sensing was acute but could be overwhelmed. Their coordination was excellent but relied on being able to communicate. All right, Dong-hyun said when Drak finished. Here's what we're going to do. The next hour was a blur of activity. Jae-min rewired the atmosphere processors to create zones of superheated air and zones of freezing cold. He rigged gravity generators to create crushing traps in key corridors. He connected the chemical storage to the outpost's sprinkler system, turning it into a weapon that could flood sections with corrosive compounds or flammable gases. Ye-jin worked from the Sejong, using the ship's sensors to map the Vecnarl's movements and predict their attack patterns. She also created false electromagnetic signatures throughout the outpost, electronic ghosts that would confuse the creature's hunting senses. So-hyun divided her time between treating the wounded Hrathik and preparing for combat. She had trained in military medicine, which meant she knew how to fight as well as heal. She fashioned spears from broken pipes, coating their tips with chemicals that would burn through Vecnarl armor. Dong-hyun coordinated everything, moving through the outpost like a shadow, setting traps and preparing fallback positions. He had studied military history his entire life, and now all those ancient battles and tactics flooded back into his mind. This was no different from any siege in human history. Smaller force defending against larger force. The key was to make the enemy pay for every meter of ground. The Vecnaral attacked exactly when Drac predicted they would. They came up through the lower levels in a wave of black armor and clicking claws. Sensors throughout the outpost tracked their advance. Dong-hyun watched from the command center, his hand hovering over the controls that would trigger their first trap. "Wait for it," he whispered. "Wait for it now!" He triggered the atmosphere processor in Section 3. Superheated air blasted through the corridors hot enough to glow. The Vecnaral shrieked in their ultrasonic frequency, a sound that made the humans' teeth ache even though they couldn't properly hear it. The creatures tried to retreat, but Dong-hyun had already sealed the corridors behind them. They were forced forward into the killing zone. Jae-min activated the chemical sprayers. Corrosive mist filled the superheated air. The Vecnaral's armor began to smoke and crack. They charged forward, trying to escape, and ran straight into the gravity trap. The floor beneath them suddenly pulled with 3 times normal gravity. The creatures slammed down, struggling against the crushing weight. "Section 3 is clear," Yejin reported, "but they're adapting. The next wave is avoiding the corridors you trapped. They're cutting through the walls instead." "Smart," Dong-hyun muttered. "Jaemin, how long until they reach the command center?" 20 minutes at their current pace. Then we fight them here." Dong-hyun turned to the others. "So-hyun, take the Hrathak back to the ship. Get them stabilized. Jaemin and I will hold this position." "Captain." So-hyun started to protest. "That's an order. We need those soldiers alive. They're witnesses. They can tell the council what happened here." Dong-hyun met her eyes. "Besides, somebody needs to fly the ship if Jaemin and I don't make it back." So-hyun wanted to argue, but she understood. She helped Drac to his feet, the Hrathak commander leaning heavily on her despite his massive size. Krell and Moth followed, moving slowly but steadily as the antidote worked through their systems. "Human," Drac said as So-hyun led him toward the exit. "Your species was judged insufficient by the council. They were wrong. Then they were gone, and Dong-hyun and Jaemin were alone in the command center. Through the walls, they could hear the sounds of the Vecnaral cutting through metal. The creatures were learning, adapting to the traps. They would be inside within minutes. "I've got one more trick," Jaemin said. He was working frantically at the engineering console. "The power grid is still partially functional. If I overload it at just the right moment, I can create an electromagnetic pulse that will blind their sensors. But it will also knock out all our systems." "Do it," Dong-hyun said. "When they come through that wall, we hit them with everything we have." The wall exploded inward. Black shapes poured through the gap, moving with terrible speed. Dong-hyun saw them clearly for the first time. Nightmare creatures with too many joints and eyes that gleamed with alien intelligence. They spotted the humans and charged. "Now!" Dong-hyun shouted. Jaemin triggered the overload. Every light in the outpost blazed with unbearable brightness, then died. The electromagnetic pulse washed through the corridors like an invisible wave. The Vecnarals screamed and stumbled, their senses overwhelmed, temporarily blind. In the darkness, 2 humans attacked with nothing but sharpened pipes and desperate courage. Dong-hyun drove his makeshift spear into the joint of a Vecnaral's armor, exactly where Drac had said the weakness would be. The research vessel Sejong drifted through the darkness at the edge of council space, its sensors scanning the region of distorted space-time that had drawn the crew here. Captain Dong-hyun watched the readings scroll across his display, fascinated by the exotic radiation patterns they were detecting. 3 months had passed since Earth's rejection by the Galactic Council, and humanity had been quietly exploring the boundaries they were allowed to operate within. "Captain, I'm getting some unusual harmonics in the radiation field," Yejin said from her station. The young scientist had been studying the phenomenon for 2 weeks, and her excitement was clear in her voice. "I think there might be a natural wormhole formation happening here. If we can document it, you'll have another paper to publish," Dong-hyun finished with a smile. "Just make sure you share credit with Jaemin for keeping our sensors working in this mess." From the engineering station, Jaemin grunted acknowledgement without looking up from his work. The radiation was playing havoc with their equipment, and he had spent most of the past week rerouting systems to compensate. "I still think this is foolish," a melodic voice said. The words came from Zith, the Peluvian observer assigned to their ship. The crystalline being hovered near the rear of the bridge, refracting the display lights into dancing patterns. Your species was told to remain within safe boundaries. This region is marked as dangerous. We're still in neutral space, Dong-hyun replied calmly. We have every right to be here. Besides, your council wants us to learn about the galaxy. How better to learn than by studying phenomena like this? Zith chimed in a way that suggested disagreement but didn't press the issue. The Peluvian had been assigned to observe humanity, not to control them, and Dong-hyun had been careful to never quite violate any actual regulations. Captain, So-hyun's voice cut through the quiet of the bridge. The medical officer was monitoring the communications array as part of her cross-training rotation. I'm picking up a distress signal. It's faint, but it's definitely there. Dong-hyun was at her station in 3 quick strides. Location: bearing 273 Mark 8. Distance approximately 4 million kilometers. It's coming from that moon. So-hyun highlighted the source on the navigation display. The moon orbited a gas giant at the very edge of the system they were studying. That's threshold 9, Zith said. And for the first time since boarding the Sejong, the Peluvian sounded worried. It's a Hrathak military outpost. They monitor the dimensional rift in this region. Dimensional rift? Yejin looked up sharply. Is that what I've been studying? Why wasn't this marked on the charts? It is marked. You simply lack the clearance to access that level of detail. Zith floated closer to the captain. We must leave this region immediately and report the distress signal to council authorities. The nearest military response team can be here in 6 standard days. 6 days? Dong-hyun stared at the Peluvian. If someone is in trouble, 6 days might be too late. It is not your concern. Your species lacks the authority to respond to military emergencies. We must leave now. Dong-hyun looked at his crew. Yejin met his eyes and gave a small nod. Jaemin glanced up from his console and shrugged, which was his way of saying he would follow whatever decision the captain made. So-hyun simply said, "There are people in trouble." "Change course," Dong-hyun ordered. "Get us to that moon as fast as possible. This is a violation of council protocols." Sheath's crystalline structure flashed angry red. "I am ordering you to reverse course." "Noted and logged," Dong-hyun said calmly. "But on Earth we have an old law from our sailing days. Any vessel that receives a distress call is required to render assistance. I'm following that law. You can file whatever complaint you want when we get back." The Sejong turned toward the moon, its engines pushing the small ship to maximum speed. It took them 2 hours to reach orbit, and what they found made So-hyun gasp in horror. The military outpost was built into the moon's surface, a massive installation that could have housed thousands. But as their sensors swept the facility, they detected almost no life signs. The buildings were shattered, walls torn open to vacuum, and debris scattered across the cratered landscape. "I'm reading 3 Hrathak life signs," So-hyun reported, her voice shaking. "Only 3. The distress signal said there were 300 soldiers stationed here. What could do this?" Jaemin whispered. "The Hrathak are supposed to be nearly indestructible." "Scanning for threats," Yejin said, her fingers flying across her console. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy readings from inside the moon." "That rift Zith mentioned, it's not just a monitoring situation. Something came through it." Dong-hyun pulled up the tactical display. What he saw made his blood run cold. The rift was a tear in space-time itself, visible as a distortion in the sensor readings, and around it, moving with purposeful coordination, were hundreds of contacts. They were inside the moon, in caverns that the Hrathak had apparently been using to contain them. "Zith," Dong-hyun said quietly, "what are those things?" The Peluvians' colors had shifted to dark purple, which their cultural briefing had said indicated fear. Vecnaral, extra-dimensional predators. They nearly destroyed the Hrathak homeworld 2,000 years ago. The rifts were supposed to be sealed. Well, this one isn't sealed anymore. Dong-hyun studied the display. More Vecnaral were emerging from the rift every minute. At this rate, they would have thousands within a day. And once they had established a foothold, they could expand the rift further, allowing even larger creatures through. "We need to close that rift." "Impossible," Zith said flatly. "Even if you had the technology, which you don't, you lack the power. Only a council dreadnought carries the kind of weapons needed to seal a dimensional tear. You must flee and report this. Perhaps the military can arrive in time to prevent a full incursion." 6 days, Dong-hyun repeated. In 6 days, how many of those things will be here? Yejin did the calculation. Based on current emergence rates, approximately 40,000. And that's assuming the rift doesn't expand. If it does, she didn't finish the sentence. So we can't wait, Donghyun said. We have to act now. Yejin, start analyzing that rift. Find me a weakness, something we can exploit. Jaemin, take inventory of everything we have that can be used as a weapon. So-hyun, prepare a rescue team. We're going down there to get those survivors. Captain, this is madness. Seeth's voice rose to a pitch that made the bridge speakers crackle. You are 4 humans on a research vessel. You cannot fight the Vecnarl. They are apex predators, evolved specifically to hunt the galaxy's most dangerous species. They will kill you. Donghyun turned to face the Peluvian. Maybe, but if we run, we're condemning this entire region to death. Those things will spread to inhabited systems. Millions will die. We might not be soldiers, but we're here and we have to try. Your species is classified as biologically insufficient, Sith said desperately. You lack the natural defenses to survive combat with creatures like this. This is suicide. Biologically insufficient, Donghyun repeated, and something like a smile crossed his face. Yeah, the council made that pretty clear. But you know what? Humans have been biologically insufficient since we climbed down from the trees. We're slower than the predators that hunted us, weaker than the beasts that competed with us, more fragile than most of the animals on our world. We survived anyway. Want to know how? Shith didn't answer. We got creative, Donghyun said. We adapted. We used our brains to compensate for what our bodies lacked. And right now my brain is telling me that 4 creative humans with a ship full of scientific equipment might just be able to do something about this situation. He turned back to his crew. All right, people. We have maybe 12 hours before those things organize enough to come looking for us. Yejin, I want options for closing or collapsing that rift. Jaemin, figure out how to turn our reactor into a really big bomb if we need to. So-hyun, medical supplies and weapons, move. The crew scattered to their tasks. Sith remained hovering in place, colors shifting through patterns of confusion and fear. The Peluvian had observed humans for 3 months and found them pleasant but unremarkable. Now, watching them prepare to face impossible odds, Sith realized that perhaps the Council had missed something important about this species. Humans knew they were insufficient. They knew they were weak. They knew the odds were against them. And they were going to fight anyway. Sith wasn't sure if that was courage or insanity. Possibly both. The Sejong descended toward the shattered outpost, carrying 4 humans into a battle they couldn't win. Donghyun watched the Vecnarl swarm on his sensors and allowed himself one moment of doubt. Then he pushed it away. Doubt was useless. Action was what mattered. Everyone remember their training, he said over the ship's intercom. And remember what Instructor Minho always said back at the academy. The best way to win a fight is to change the rules. The ship touched down near the outpost's main entrance. Through the viewports, they could see the devastation up close. Claw marks the size of a human body scored the walls. Dark stains marked where Hrathak soldiers had fallen. Let's go save some lives, Donghyun said. The airlock opened, and humanity stepped out to face the darkness. The council chamber was enormous, stretching upward into darkness that seemed to have no end. Taemin stood at the center of a circular platform, surrounded by beings that made him feel impossibly small. He had prepared for this moment for months, yet nothing could have truly readied him for the reality of standing before the Galactic Council. Above him, arranged in tiers that climbed toward the shadowed ceiling, sat representatives of 43 different species. Some were massive, their bodies armored with natural plates that gleamed under the chamber's blue lighting. Others were small and crystalline, refracting light into rainbow patterns. A few existed as clouds of gas contained within force fields. Humanity had discovered they were not alone in the universe, and the universe was far stranger than anyone had imagined. State your purpose, human. The voice came from directly ahead, deep and resonant. Taemin looked up at Senior Arbiter Queln, a member of the Hrathic Dominion. The creature stood nearly 4 meters tall, its body covered in thick, dark armor that looked more like stone than flesh. Its forearms ended in clawed hands, and its face was dominated by 3 eyes that gleamed with cold intelligence. I represent humanity, Taemin said, keeping his voice steady. We come before this council to request membership in the galactic community. Earth wishes to join the family of civilized worlds. A sound rippled through the chamber, something between clicking and hissing. Taemin realized it was laughter. His hands tightened at his sides, but he maintained his composure. Behind him, just outside the spotlight that pinned him in place, he could feel the presence of his colleagues. Ji Wu, the military advisor, and Haiwan, the xenobiologist. They could not help him now. This test was his alone. Your request has been noted, Queln said. However, before membership can be granted, you must undergo evaluation. Present your species for assessment. Taemin had known this was coming. He activated the holographic display built into his suit. Around him, images of humans appeared. Athletes running, scientists working, artists creating, soldiers training. The images showed humanity at its best, but even he could see how unimpressive they must look to these beings. Humans evolved on a planet we call Earth, he began. We are a carbon-based life form, breathing oxygen and nitrogen. Our average height is between 1.6 and 1.8 meters. We have 2 arms, 2 legs, and insufficient natural defenses, a voice interrupted. It came from one of the smaller beings, something that looked like a collection of floating crystals. No armor plating, no exoskeleton, no hardened skin. Your flesh is soft and easily damaged. No venom glands, another voice added, this one buzzing like insects. No claws, no fangs, no natural weapons of any kind. How does your species defend itself? Taemin had prepared answers for these questions. We use tools. We create weapons and armor. We build defenses, and all species use tools, Queln cut him off. We are asking about natural capabilities. Your strength level? Average human can lift approximately their own body weight, Taemin said. More of that clicking, hissing laughter. A Hrothic child can lift 50 times their body weight, Queln said. What is your running speed? Top human athletes can reach speeds of approximately 44 kilometers per hour for short bursts. Inadequate. A Vrelnoth can maintain speeds of 200 kilometers per hour indefinitely. Your sensory capabilities? Taemin listed them. Visual spectrum limited to certain wavelengths. Hearing range that missed both very high and very low frequencies. Sense of smell that was weak compared to many Earth animals. Each answer seemed to disappoint the Council further. Your homeworld gravity? Another delegate asked. 9.8 meters per second squared. Low. Your world must be a paradise of gentle conditions. Tell us, human. What great threats did your species overcome to achieve intelligence? What predators hunted you? What environmental pressures forced you to evolve? This was the question Taemin had dreaded. Earth has many predators, but humans learned to avoid them or drive them away. Our greatest challenge was each other, Queln finished. Yes, we have reviewed your historical records. Your species achieved space travel while still fighting wars among yourselves. You nearly destroyed your own planet multiple times with weapons of your own making. You have never faced an extinction threat from another species. You have never had to fight for survival against an enemy from the stars. The chamber fell silent. Taemin felt the weight of that silence pressing down on him. Everything Queln said was true. Humanity had been lucky. Earth was a gentle world, and humans had evolved in conditions that the galaxy would consider easy. They had never been tested by the universe itself. Every species in this council earned their place through survival. Queln continued. The Hrothic fought against planet-sized predators that could crush mountains. The Peluvians evolved in the hearts of stars. The Quellan survived a galaxy-spanning plague that killed 90% of all life in their region of space. Each species here proved their worth through trials that would have destroyed weaker races. What trials has humanity overcome? Taemin opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer that would satisfy them. Humanity's struggles against poverty, disease, and war seemed trivial compared to the cosmic horrors these beings had faced. I see, Queln said, and there might have been something like pity in his voice. You are young, human. Your species has potential, but you are not ready for full membership. The galaxy is dangerous. There are threats you cannot imagine. Species that would view your soft flesh as a delicacy. Empires that would enslave your entire world without a second thought. Creatures that exist only to consume and destroy. We can learn, Taemin said quietly. We can adapt. We can... Perhaps, Queln interrupted, but not today. The Council's decision is final. Humanity will be granted observer status. You may send diplomats to Council meetings. You may trade with member species, but you will not be allowed to colonize beyond your home system without Council approval. You will not be given access to military technologies. You will not be permitted to vote on Council matters. You are classified as a Class 7 civilization. Technologically adequate but biologically insufficient. The words hit Taemin like physical blows. Biologically insufficient, not good enough. Not strong enough, fast enough, tough enough. Not worthy. Do you accept these terms? Queln asked. Taemin wanted to argue, to rage, to demand that they give humanity a chance. But he had been chosen for this role because of his discipline. He bowed his head. We accept. Good. You will be provided with guest quarters and a council liaison. You may remain on the station to observe proceedings and establish diplomatic channels. Is there anything else? Taemin looked up. Yes, I request access to the council's historical archives. Records of galactic conflicts, survival adaptations, and threat assessments. If humanity is to learn, we must understand what we face. Queln seemed surprised by the request. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence. An unusual request, but granted. Perhaps your species will prove educable, if nothing else. This session is concluded. The platform beneath Taemin's feet began to descend. As it lowered him back to the chamber floor, he looked up one last time at the assembled delegates. They were already moving on to other business, humanity already forgotten. Just another weak species requesting entry to a club they didn't qualify for. But Taemin wasn't looking at them with defeat in his eyes. He was memorizing every species present, cataloging their apparent strengths, noting their reactions and attitudes. Jiwoo had taught him that intelligence gathering was the first step in any military operation. And Haewon had reminded him that evolution favored not the strongest but the most adaptable. The council thought humanity was weak. They had no idea what they had just invited to observe them. No idea that humanity's greatest strength was learning from its enemies. No idea that every one of their dismissive comments was being recorded and analyzed. The platform reached the floor. Taemin stepped off and walked toward where Jiwoo and Haewon waited. His face was calm, but his mind was racing. They had been rejected. But that rejection had given them something valuable. A chance to study the galaxy's powers from the inside. A chance to learn from species that had survived cosmic trials. Humanity would prove itself worthy. Not today, perhaps, but soon. The galaxy had no idea what was coming.